Okay. Okay, so let's start. I will start with a slow pace, so the people who join in a few minutes won't miss much. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for attending this presentation about Selenium and about modern testing with Selenium. I hope that I share something valuable with you, and you get good insights and you get good ideas on things you can use on your daily tasks for automation. Then let's start. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Diego. I live in Berlin. I am Colombian. I am one of the technical leads of the Selenium project, and I also work in Sauce Labs, which is a company that basically relies on using open source extensively, and that's why most of my time I spend it working in Selenium. I also wanted to share openly that if you have any questions, I have the chat here open. No, actually I don't. Now I have the chat open. So if you have a question, you can write it to the chat, and maybe I can leave it to the end, or if you have questions that you want to interrupt me right away, you can also do it. Just unmute yourself. Okay, moving on. So today I want to share a few things with you. Basically, I want to talk about Selenium 4, so what we did and what we came through to actually be able to release Selenium 4. And also, I'm going to talk about the web in general, like how it started and how it evolved, and where does testing fit in that evolution, which is something we tend to overlook. And based on that, I want to share where, in my opinion, Selenium fits in today's testing. Then I'm going to jump to some demos, and in the end, I'm going to share some details on the things we're working right now in the next few months to improve Selenium even more. So yeah, so Selenium 4 is here. It took a while. It basically took over 3 years in development, over 4,000 commits. We built a new Selenium grid, and we have a new website, we have new documentation, and we have lots of new features. Clearly, spending more than 3 years developing a new version, it's not efficient. It's not what we want to do. And at the end of the presentation, you will see a few things we're doing already to improve that. We're trying to do releases more often, to actually bring more features right away instead of waiting a long time, which was kind of the approach we were having before. And one of the cool things about Selenium is that Selenium is completely free as in speech, which means that we have a completely open governance. And if you go to our website and you check the link of our governance, which is a document that is not too long, basically you will see how you can be part of the project, what requisites you need to fulfill, and how you can actually be more active and participative in our project. And another very interesting thing is that the implementation of Selenium is called WebDriver, and WebDriver is based on a W3C standard. Well, actually, WebDriver is a W3C standard. And this means that different big companies, some of them produce and create browsers, like Apple, Microsoft, Mozilla, and Google. They are also in the same group where we meet once every month, and we discuss implementations and improvements to the WebDriver standard. So this means that most of the time, I say most of the time because I know it's not really always the situation, you can run a test that works in several browsers at the same time. And then we're also working right now in something called the Bidirectional protocol and the Shadow DOM. So this means that
Well, Shadow DOM is already out there in some browsers, but the bidirectional protocol will give you some features in all browsers that today are only available in browsers like Chrome and Firefox. And yeah, to round this up, super important, Selenium is made by and for the community. For example, most of the people who are working in the project, yeah, we're working with some company that is supported or using Selenium extensively, like my case. But all of us, we were actually, before joining any company, we were part of the project, which means that most of the people who are working in Selenium come from the community and do things for the community. Okay, so let's talk about the web and how testing has evolved along the web. Years ago, when the web was starting, we basically had two types of websites, like static websites that were meant to share content. And we also have some sort of limited websites that use some JavaScript and some basic things to do e-commerce. And the idea was that there was almost no user interaction. So you could maybe input something or you could just read the content, no more. And all the rendering was done on the server side. And this means the typical example of this is if you have a form that you're filling out all the data and you click submit, and then you get an error back saying, hey, this field has an incorrect value, but then all the form is completely empty. This means that all the information went to the server, was processed, there was an error, and then everything was sent back. Like the error was sent back, but all the information you already typed is lost. So this was extremely annoying. And back then, I remember I was working mostly on desktop applications. And testing was focused on this type of desktop application. So most of the time, manual testing, and also exploratory testing was kind of the rule that was going on back then. Then we advanced a bit and we moved to some applications that were interactive. One of the main goals of this type of application was to simplify how you could create content. So now you were able to, for example, write comments in a blog post, and they could render right away because you had some dynamic HTML. You were combining server-side rendering, but most of the things were happening now on the client side. So you could actually change the DOM by using JavaScript and styles with CSS. And then you had the first version of something that was very powerful called jQuery. And then you could have like a bunch of things happening right in the browser without the need of interacting with the server. And during those days, the common tool to use for testing was called QTP, which was extremely expensive, and it was kind of a recorder that you could use. And then this was exporting some code that you could like change and edit to make it better. So a very expensive tool that belonged to, I think, Micro Focus, and then Hewlett-Packard, and basically today this tool, I'm not sure if it exists, but sometimes it's actually sponsoring the Selenium conference. And the other tool that was out there was Selenium. And Selenium was just starting. It was just using JavaScript, embedding JavaScript into the browser to do testing. So pretty much how Cypress works today. Then we moved more to the future, and we had the web frameworks era. This is kind of the era we're living today, where we had all these concepts of the model view controller. APIs were becoming super important, so all the microservices trend came to be alive. And then we started talking about components. For example, if you have frameworks like React, like Vue, like Polymer, also Ember and Angular, you were able to compress some logic of the complete application in a single place that you could call a component. And then the result of all this is that testing
it was easier to do it on different levels. You didn't need to test everything right from the browser. You could actually do API testing. You could actually do component testing. So this is actually getting much better and to do testing much faster. And the bottom line that I want to share here is that today, using a tool to do end-to-end testing is not the only option. Maybe it's the easiest one because you would test the whole stack, but finding the bug will be harder because you don't know if the bug will be in the API or in the database or in the web application. But if you use an approach where you can actually test the different layers apart, testing will be much faster. So where does Selenium fit in today's testing? I'm gonna explain that, or I'm gonna share my opinion with an example application. So this application, as I was mentioning some moments ago, Selenium 4 has a new Selenium grid, and this server has a UI, and we developed this. This is a React application, and I'm gonna just put my mouse on top, and I'm gonna. So for example, this application is a React application, and it's divided in several components. For example, this thing that renders the information about the node that serves the browser is a component. This thing that shows how many tests are queued is a component. All this, every single part of the application is a component. And the meaning of this is that you could actually test the application as a whole, right? But if you want to test specific things of the application, how it renders, you actually could test the component. If I want to test, for example, that if I get information from the API and I want to show concurrency 1, then I can just test, I can just test this part of the component. Another example is I could render 3 node components, and I could test that this component is showing a 3. And I don't need to open a browser for that. That's the cool part. So when we are running tests in our Selenium CI to test all these things, what do? So we have different levels of testing in this application. We have the presentation layer, we have the logical layer, and we have the. So the presentation is React, and the logical layer is a combination between sometimes some APIs and sometimes some React components. And the service layer is clearly the API that we're using. We use GraphQL in the backend of this server. So if you want to choose a tool that goes from end to end, testing everything, like common use cases, then you can also have a tool that tests the integration part, right? Because you could say, I could mock the service, I could mock the API, and then I only test the presentation layer, and I test the logical layer, because I also have some unit tests, and I also have some API tests. And then for this level, like having tested the whole flow end to end and the integration layer, Selenium is a good tool. But if you want to move a bit lower in the hierarchy of testing, you also have components. So these are the components that render the application in different ways. And for that, you don't need to use Selenium. You don't need to use a browser. In our case, since we have a React application, what we use is Jest, this test runner that is very popular in the JavaScript and TypeScript world. And we use testing library, which is kind of the default library for testing you get when you want to test components in React. So far, what I have said, I believe makes sense, because you're kind of dividing the ways of testing in different levels. But I would like to show with a clear, more tangible example what this means to us. So for example, to test, so this is a small application. We don't have a lot of pages, but when we run the CI and we run the tests, for components, we have around I'm sorry. So when we run tests and on the service layer, we run all the unit tests and we run all the API tests, and we run about 150 tests. When we run the component tests, we have around 30 tests. So the component tests are rendering the component. They're testing that it's completely rendered and that the information is correct using mocks. And then on the integration layer, which is basically the same of the end-to-end in our case, I want you to guess in your head how many Selenium tests, like actually opening a browser, we have. I will give you like 3 seconds. So imagine you have to create a driver, load the browser, go to the page, assert the element, this and that. So in total, to test the user interface of the Selenium grid, we have 3 tests. And we are allowed to do that because in the other layers, we're already testing everything else. And if somebody's interested, feel free to ping me in Twitter or in Slack, and I'm happy to share how these tests look like, how do we run them, and so on. But the bottom line message is that to make testing faster, you don't always need browsers. You can use other levels, and this may sound contradictory because I am part of the Selenium project. I am part of a project that helps you use browsers to test. But the problem is that in the last 5 to 10 years, people have been using browsers a bit too much for testing. And if you want testing to be faster, focus on other levels of the application. So let's jump into a practical demo. For this demo, I'm going to be using a web application I created for demos, and it's called by Visual To Do App. So the application, basically, it's doing something that you enter an item, and it's something that you want to do or you have to do, like buying milk or whatever. And what the application is doing in the background is fetching an image from Unsplash, a website that gives you images for free. Also, if you saw that, the application has some basic authentication before checking into it. So let's go there. I'm gonna now show my browser, and then I need to now open another. Sorry, I need to open a different. Yeah. So this is good. I need to go to. So the application is here in this GitHub repository. So you will get the links at the end of the presentation. And I will use something called Gitpod. Gitpod is kind of, how can I say it? It's an open cloud-based environment, which is super nice because it just gives you a machine to work with everything ready. And basically, the environment is ready for you. So I don't know why this is not starting. Where is the, okay, so I have a problem here. Right, so let's do this. I was not authenticated. Yeah, so if you want to try Gitpod, I completely advise it. I don't work with them, but it's completely free. I mean, I don't have an account that I'm paying or anything. It's just completely free for open source. So you can also try it out. And then you have some scripts right there. So what happens now is that I have my application running. And this is not really part of the presentation. I'm just sharing with you a tool that I normally use for demos and presentations. And let's open it. I'm going to make it public so I can access it. And I'm not going to open it here. I'm going to open it in the private window. Okay, so now we can do things. So here, this is the application. So the user is admin, and as I was mentioning, like, I don't know, like buy bread, and then the application fetches in the background an image of a bread. So that's what the application does. It's done in React. It has a few things. So what I'm going to do right now, I am going to start running some tests using Selenium 4 to test this application and using the different features that Selenium 4 has. So let's go back. And the first test I want to share with you is how to do basic authentication in Selenium. I'm going to use the Java flavor because that's what I mostly use every single day. And I'm going to show you how this works. First, I will change here in the configuration the URL so everything works. So an authentication test. Let's make this bigger so you can all see. And I am using right now the version 4.1.4 that was released earlier today. So you can also use that as well. And you can also get these examples in GitHub. I will share the link at the end. Right, so I'm going to use Chrome in this time. And the interesting part of this is that it has been a while since browsers don't let you authenticate via the URL. So doing admin, add, and the URL. And what we are doing here is that we're exposing a bunch of methods that you can use to authenticate yourself to the application when the browser is opening. This is available in all languages. I'm just using Java because it's just much easier for me. So what you do first is that obviously you create a new instance of Chrome driver. And then what we do here is that we register a user and a password that in our case is admin. I go to the URL, I sleep just for demo purposes, and I assert that the title is the same one as the one I have here. So let's run this. And then Chrome will open. So there it is. And then it just checks the title and, well, obviously the test passes. It's not an amazing test, but what I'm trying to show here is that now you can go over this first step of like authenticating to the application that you need to test. So let's move to the next one. Let's talk about the shadow DOM. Could someone say in the chat with a yes, I understand what shadow DOM is, or no, I don't understand what shadow DOM is, just quickly, so I know if I need to go into detail to explain what a shadow DOM is? Like 2 or 3 people can just like write something on the chat saying, yes, I understand what it is, or no, I don't know what shadow DOM is. Okay, so 1 doesn't know. It's not an iframe. It could be inside an iframe. Okay, so we have 1 on 1, so it takes like 3 minutes more. So let's talk about shadow DOM. So shadow DOM has many useful features. Basically, it helps you to, let's say, hide some part of an application inside a node, inside a node in the DOM that is not affected by the rest of the application. So for example, so the typical example is the Twitter button. Like, let's imagine you have an application that has some styles, some colors, but you want to have the Twitter button with the Twitter colors, right? And then you can put that inside a shadow DOM node, and then this won't be affected. So how does that look? In this case, this title for this application is actually embedded in a shadow DOM node. If I inspect the application, I'm going to make this bigger so you can have a look. Here, I hope you can see this. There is the app name, which is the area where the title is. And then you have a place where the shadow root starts. And then inside the shadow root, you have components. I mean, you could have many more things. You can have like a form, you can have images, whatever you want. And the point is that since like maybe like 6 or 7 months ago, you actually couldn't get this element through WebDriver tests. You had to do like some JavaScript magic and pierce the element and do this and that. But now this is part of the standard that WebDriver implements, and therefore you can use it in several browsers. So I'm going to close this for now, and I'm going to go back to the test that shows how Shadow DOM works. So here it is. Let's make this bigger. Now our test is a bit more sophisticated in the create driver part. Well, we are already authenticating, but then let's jump to the interesting part. So what we need to do first is to find the element that contains the shadow root. In this case, it's called app name. That's what we saw a moment ago. And what we ask after that is a search context. A search context is a context where we can actually find all the elements that are inside that shadow root. So we get the shadow root from the element we just found, and then we just say, okay, find this inside the shadow root, and that's pretty much it. So what we're doing here, we're going inside the element, we are getting the data, and we are asserting that the title there is actually the same one we're expecting, and that's pretty much it. It's not really spectacular, but to get this element in the past was really complicated, and people have been asking this for several years. All right, so let's move to the next one. Relative locators. So relative locators is an interesting new feature in Selenium 4. Some people find it useful, some people don't. And we are at the project basically open for feedback. So if you think that this is not that helpful, then let us know. If you think this is helpful, but it's failing in some another way, let us know. But before jumping into comments, like what is relative locators like? So the idea is that you have an element that you know how to find, and you can identify another one based on the location, relative to the one you just found. So let's say that for some reason, you know how to find this purple element, and you can say, I want to find the one that is above or the one that is below. That's the overall idea. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna add 3 items to this application, and then we're gonna find the one in the middle, let's say here, and then we're gonna say, okay, I want to find the one that is on top. I want to find the one that is below. So let's have a look at the test. For example, then we created driver and everything. Something additional I'm doing here, I'm doing an API call. So before testing the application, I am making sure there are no other data in the application, so it's not polluted. So I am actually deleting all the items because I want to add 3 items. Oh yeah, but let me show you first with a very simple example how this looks. So this is a typical application with a grid. So for example, I would like to say, I would like to find the London sourcebot. And the London sourcebot could be easily described as whatever is below Warsaw and whatever is to the left of Boston. So this one is London. So let's have a look at that test first. And this is what I'm doing here. I'm finding all the elements that are tagged by a list, which is each one of the sourcebots. And then I'm gonna say what is left of Boston and what is below Warsaw. So if I run this test, let's see what happens. What should happen is that when the London source bot is found, it should be blurred. And then, sorry, this moved here. There it is. Oh, it found the wrong one because this depends on the layout as well. So I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So let me run this again. The problem somehow is that when I maximize a window, it jumps to the other screen. So not sure why that happens. So here we have all the elements. And then I'm going to say what's below Warsaw and to the left of Boston. There it is. And then it unblurs again. Cool. So that was the simple case. And what we want to do now is actually test our application. So we want to add an item that will be in the top, which is by cheese, one in the middle that is by wine, and one at the bottom that is clean the table. So we add them. There is a method I wrote above to add them. I refresh the contents to be sure that things are there. And then I basically look for the elements to be present. So I could actually find all the items that are present. And then I will say, okay, I want to find the one that is above. I will blur it, I will unblur it. And then I want to find the one that is below. And I will do the same. So let's do that. So Chrome opens, and then again, it's moving over there. Here we have all the elements. So it finds the one on top, it unblurs it, and then it finds the one below, and it gets unblurred away. So that's the idea, using below and above to find the elements that are just next to the other one. Cool. So that was relative locators. And now let's talk about network interception, which I feel is the most interesting feature that you can use through these methods. To explain this example first, I want to remind you that in the back of this application, there is an API. So when I do, for example, I say, I don't know, buy juice, what is happening in the background, and I want to show that what is happening is there is a post to an API, and there is a request with a JSON, very simple JSON, but there is a post happening, and the response is also a JSON that has an ID, it has a name, and it has the key completed, right? So there is an API happening, and in addition to that, there is a get happening to Unsplash as well to get the image. If you see it here, so here it is. This is the request happening to Unsplash. But I mean, this looks nice. It's nice to test application. It's nice to see that things are working. But in real life, like when you want to test this application, you don't really need to go all the time to unsplash.com and pull an image, right? You don't need to do that because that will actually make your tests slower. So you could either build a mock or replace that image with something that is another mock, so and you can make your test faster. So how does that look? So the scenario I'm trying to share with you here is, you want to test the way your application looks and the way your application renders things. But for that, you don't need to use APIs the whole time. So for example, if you are in a team that has some people doing front-end and has some people doing back-end, imagine that for some reason the back-end is down, you can use mocks for that, and you don't need to build a mock outside Selenium. You can actually do it here. So let's run this test. that it's called add item and replace the image. So I'm going to type by rise. And what I will do is that when there is a request that goes to unsplash.com, what I will do is that the response will have this image from the source bot that is here. It will show this image, right? And then I will wrap all the calls inside a network interceptor. And what will happen inside this block is that everything that gets executed and goes through the network will be inspected and will be intercepted by that configuration that we did here. So let's see how that looks. And now Chrome opens, and I will say by rise, but yeah, all the images have been replaced by the ones I said there. And I'm gonna go back to the application just for a moment. That if I refresh, I have all the elements I've been adding to every single of the in every test that I have been doing. Cool. So something that is next to this, I just want to do something that was, I will delete the items manually because somehow the items were not deleted by the before test. So I'm not sure what happened there. So what I want to show now is that, yeah, you were mocking the image, right? But what I want to actually mock is the response from the API so I can render something. And we can do that too, right? So let's have a test that's called clean the bathroom, but the response is a mocked item that will actually say go to the park. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna say, if you're doing a request to a URL that is called items, and the method is a post, then okay, this application is trying to do a post to the API. And the response is gonna be a JSON with 200 status, and the contents are gonna be an ID, a fake ID, the mocked item, and we're gonna see complete false. So instead of saying, I have to clean the bathroom, I will render something that says go to the park. Right, and the point is that, as I was mentioning, you don't need to have your API running the whole time. You can have some mocks written and render them through Selenium to actually test your application without having an API running. So I clean the bathroom, I make a post to see that I'm actually writing that. I click on add item, and then the response is go to the park. And therefore, the request has also that from Unsplash. And I think that was the last demo. Yeah. So just to give some context, you might wonder, how is this all working? What's happening in the background, right? The idea behind this is something called the bidirectional specification, the bidirectional protocol by WebDriver. And this means that you can manipulate different aspects of the browser through Selenium, through WebDriver in a standard way. So this means that you will be able to do this in Safari, in Chrome, in Firefox, in Edge, in all of them. And then this will be done in a standard way. So you can, for example, run a test in Safari and inspect the network and see how things are changing and mock responses and so on. But yeah, if you maybe remember the beginning of the presentation, this is a standard that is. So for now, what we're doing in the project is that we're exposing a bunch of methods that you can use. And the idea is that if you attach yourself to those methods, when the specification is ready and working, you can still use those methods, right? But we also have the option, we allow you, we expose the methods to use the Chrome debugging protocol. So all this magic is happening right now because we translate those standardized calls to the Chrome debugging protocol. And the thing here is that we're relying on a protocol that is made for debugging. So if you were paying attention to the demo, you could see in the background that there was a lot of logging, a lot of text happening, coming up in the test. And the thing is that when everything works, it's super nice because, I mean, you have your test working. But when something fails and you want to check the logs, it's a bit of an issue because it's just too much information that the Chrome, that the CDP is returning to you. So the idea, what we recommend is that please try to use whenever is possible, as much as possible, the methods we expose to you. And this is documented. I can also share the links at the end. But also, if you need to, you can use directly the methods that are exposed by CDP. So I guess the message here is try it and handle with care. Now let's jump into the final part of the presentation. Let's talk a bit about the future of Selenium and WebDriver. And one of the things that we're going to be working, I mean, not the next week, but ideally in the next 1-2 months, is we want to add into Selenium a browser manager. So the meaning of this is that imagine you have a machine and you don't even have Chrome installed. So what we want to do is that when you run your test, and then Selenium will detect that you have no browser installed and you have no Chrome driver installed. So Selenium will actually download those things and install them for you. So the moment between writing your test and having it running, it's much faster and you don't need to care about it. One of the cool things is that, I don't know if you know Bonnie Garcia, the person who implemented WebDriver Manager for Java. He is joining, he's helping us in the project pretty soon. And that's why we can actually have some expertise on the matter on that. So the idea is that whenever you use Python or JavaScript or C# or whatever you want to use from Selenium, you don't need to care about the browser or the browser driver. We want to have everything ready for you. The next thing we are starting to work pretty soon, ideally in the next 2 to 3 weeks, is that we want to build the WebDriver community, the WebDriver ecosystem all together. I mean, if you know, there are many projects built on top of Selenium. For example, there is Selenite for Java, there is Selenium base for Python, or there is also Water for Ruby. There are several projects built on top, and also Fluent Selenium and many more. Nightwatch for JavaScript. And the point is that during all these years, Selenium has said, I mean, this is the project, use it, or look for something else we not build on top. But actually, we have a lot of like power, a lot of users that we can pass this message of saying, you know, if you want to use us, go for it. But there are all these tools built on top with automatic waiting, with the ability for you to record tests, with the ability for you to download hard files from Chrome and so on. So this is what we're going to be working soon. We're going to be reaching out to these projects where we're going to be figuring out how we can all work together and offer you a better set of alternatives to work with automation in testing. And the point of this is that WebDriver is much more than Selenium. So I don't really like when people say, I'm comparing Playwright or Cypress with Selenium, because this is not really a fair comparison. Selenium is just a library that runs browsers. Many people use it for testing, but it's not really a tool that does all the things that Cypress does or Playwright does. That's why I just want to highlight that WebDriver is much more than Selenium. So you have projects like WebDriver.io, also implemented by implementing the WebDriver ecosystem. And they have all these tools that, as I said a moment ago, they have automatic waiting, they have automatic screenshot on error, they have so many features ready for you to be used, and you don't need to use Selenium directly the whole time. So the message is that please question when you see people comparing an Apple and something different. Like Selenium cannot be comparing to those tools because it's not actually having the same purposes and the same capabilities. But if you, for example, compare something like Selenite, an amazing tool to automate browsers and test things in Java, you can compare it with WebDriver, with Playwright, for example. So these are equivalent comparisons. So someone is asking when Selenium will have some same methods as in Selenite. So that's exactly the point I'm talking about. The idea is that we want to tell people these methods are nice, the ones that Selenite implements. You should be using Selenite. I mean, we want to reach out to the person who implements Selenite, and we want to work together with them. We want to find ways to collaborate and to send users their way so they get more popular and they get more, or they get stronger. So we will not implement those helpers and methods inside Selenium because it doesn't really make sense. It's already implemented in different projects. What we will implement is something that is not implemented in these projects, something like the browser manager. I hope that made sense for you. So just to start closing, the invitation is that please join us. So go to selenium.dev support and you will find all the channels there, the Slack channel, different chats, the email, the documentation, everything's there. And if you're interested in helping with the things we do in open source in Source Labs, then that's our address, opensource.sourcelabs.com. And if you want to check the code I was showing a moment ago, then you can check that on my profile in GitHub. One is called Selenium for Demo, and the other one is called My Visual To Do App. So you can try it out there. And with that, I want to thank you for being here, for taking the time, and hopefully this gives you good insights on what you can do with Selenium these days. Thank you.
So if you have some questions, please, you can ask Diego.
Sure. I mean, you can ask me about anything related to Selenium if you wish. I can be here for a few minutes more. Yeah, and thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. Bye. Oh, no, we have some questions.
All the things. Okay, so if I understand the question, you mean that all the things I showed work in mobile? Some things work, and mostly with Chrome. But the problem is that how can I explain this in a simple way? If your application is entirely web and you're using a browser on the mobile, most of the things should be there. But the problem is that, for example, if you have an application running in iOS or Android that has like a pop-up, and this is not like a pop-up from the browser, but like a pop-up from the operating system, like then you cannot interact with that with Selenium. So you have to figure out if the application is actually completely web and there is no pop-up of the operating system or something strange, and then you cannot use Selenium. Something we're doing that it's extremely long-term. We're already starting to talk with the Appium project to see how we can like come closer to each other and maybe bring those features to both sides. But one of the complicated things is that, for example, the iOS driver, what you're mentioning, is extremely hard because Apple doesn't publish any API. Like I mean, you're able to automate Android because, sorry, you're able to automate iOS because some people just sat down and reverse engineered how you can actually interact with iOS. And that's one of the big problems that you're facing in automation. And that's why, yeah, that's why some things. So this mobile buy and the iOS helpers are I think they have changed it in the Appium project. So I would recommend you to ask the Appium project for those things. They have a support page or like a page where you can post questions or in GitHub as well. Yeah. On what stage Appium and Selenium integration is? On just asking, hey, do you think this is a good idea? And they said, and we said, like, we all said, yeah, this makes sense. We should think about how to do that, but nothing else. I mean, I see this as something good that could happen in, I don't know, 2 or 3 years because the projects are very different. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then I think thank you for being here and for taking the time to be here.
So thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Have a nice evening.